Today, we're going to be talking about the power of words. If you look all throughout the scripture, you can tell so clearly that words are powerful. That's how the world started. Let there be light. God spoke it into existence. Creation itself, the book of Psalms says, speaks. God has always spoken and spoken last and best through his Son. Jesus was called the Word. The Bible we read from is the living Word, alive and active, and salvation itself happens when the tongue and mouth confess Jesus is Lord. So we're going to talk about the power of words this morning as we look through the book of Proverbs. Well, today we're going to dive right in. We were going to ask the question, how do I speak wise words? And we are going to conclude three things. To speak wise words, we need to recognize the power of our words. We need to understand the quality of wise words. And lastly, we need to use various kinds of wise words. We're going to recognize their power, understand the quality, and then figure out the kinds of wise words we can use. So let's just talk about the power of wise words. This verse has been ringing around in my mind and my heart and my soul all week, and we're going to start with it. It's from Proverbs 18:21, and it shows the force of our words. It says this. It says, the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. When you see that phrase, just the tongue, think your words. And it says that words are so powerful, they hold within them the power of life and death. Now, maybe the less obvious point is that those words, as we speak them, have an effect on us. Proverbs makes that point. It says this in chapter 12, verse 13 to 14. It says, evildoers are trapped by their sinful talk, and so the innocent escape trouble. From the fruit of his mouth, a man is satisfied with good. So you can see as we speak, our words do something to us. Evildoers are trapped by their words, and the fruit of good speech satisfies the one speaking. That might be the less obvious point, but the most obvious one is that our words affect other people. We've all known what it feels like to have life spoken over us, and we've probably all known the converse as well, that sometimes those words can just feel like they bring death into our life. I want to show you what I love is when these ancient principles of wisdom in God's Word bear out in contemporary research and in contemporary life. This point that words are powerful may be obvious, but I'll tell you one place I want to draw your attention to where I've seen it. There's a thing I want to tell you about called the magic ratio. Okay, you may have heard the golden ratio. It's like an art kind of mathematical thing. This is not that. This is the magic ratio. It's been coined by a psychologist named Dr. John Gottman. Does that name ring a bell? He's like the marriage guy, right? If you want to know how to strengthen your marriage, you want to know what leads to bad news in marriage, you read John Gottman. And he rose to prominence when he started a longitudinal study, one of these that take place over years in the 1970s. And he brought couples into his lab, and hysterically, I could just imagine getting this assignment. You'd come into his lab as a married couple, and he'd say, I'd like you to solve one of your conflicts in the next 15 minutes. For only just, why didn't I think of that? Just 15 minutes and I'll fix it. And like any rational person, like any researcher, like any comedically inclined person, of course he filmed people trying to work out a contentious issue in 15 minutes. And what rose him to prominence is that they had a theory about how communication might really impact your marriage. They had a theory about what might lead towards marriages sticking together and what might lead towards marriages failing. And so 9 years later, after they got this data, based on their predictions, with 90% accuracy, they were able to predict if couples were going to stay together or get divorced, based on film from a 15-minute conversation. That blew my mind when I read it. And of course, you, I hope, are asking the same question I did. Well, what did you discover? What did you think? What did you predict would lead towards marriages breaking down? And it was this simple magic ratio. The couples that stayed together kept at least a 5-to-1 ratio of positive interactions to negative interactions when they were in conflict. They kept that ratio. And when that ratio went down, when it got near 1-to-1, and God forbid, when it got to more negative interactions, than positive interactions when you were trying to work out conflict, it led towards 90% likelihood of breaking up. This research tells us it's not that we argue in our relationship and with our words, it's how we argue. It wasn't the presence of a disagreement that made couples split up. It was how they went through it. So what are those nasty negative interactions we need to pay attention to? He said that, again, you can argue in a marriage, but when that anger, when that conflict is tinged with criticism, contempt, defensiveness, or stonewalling, what Gottman affectionately calls the 4 horsemen of relationship communication. I love that apocalyptic metaphor. He said, when you have those present, you are in trouble. That is a negative interaction. He says, also, we can use our body to speak, can't we? So when we roll our eyes, when we sneer, when we make a sarcastic comment, when we point a finger, turn our back, or shut down, those are those negative interactions. And he said, couples, just watching them for 15 minutes talking, if they kept a ratio of 5 positive to 1 negative words, they stuck together. 90% likelihood. And when that ratio went down and got closer to more negative than positive, couples were really in trouble. Now, what I found interesting about this is he came up with a second magic ratio. That's when you're in conflict. When you're just doing life together, do you know what the ratio is? Do you think it went up or down? It went up. When you're just having normal life together, you need to keep a 20-to-1 ratio, right? So you got to get on that, right? For every 1 negative thing that you say, you need to say 20 positive things to offset that in normal life. And now, I didn't read this anywhere, and I came up with the Adam Jackley magic ratio too, which, of course, you would expect that from me. And I want to show you what my ratio is. Ready? It's infinity to 1. Okay? And let me tell you what I mean. We all know that there are things you can say that no quantity of positive statements can erase. Have you ever had somebody say something like that to you? Where they say something mean or cruel or hurtful, and they're just like, well, I guess I just got to say 5 really nice things and we're good? We're square? No. People can say things to you that will stick with you for the rest of your lives. And I betcha, if I asked you, even as we're having this conversation, have had those negative things pop up in your mind. That teacher that said, you're stupid. That person that said, you'll never amount to anything. That person who said, you're worthless. Those words, no quantity of good words can erase. We need to be careful how we talk in conflict. We need to be careful how we talk all the time. But there are words that quite literally can speak death into your lives. And as wise people here at New Community Church, we're going to learn to use those words wisely. And we are going to have that sort of self-control to not say those things, because what the Proverbs knows this. I want to show you one more verse to just prove this point, that infinity to 1 ratio. In Proverbs 12:18, it says this, the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Now, it uses the image of a sword. Now, I don't have a lot of sword fighting background. I hope that you can't tell that, but I don't. But I've watched lots of movies with sword fights, and what happens is, they go back and forth, and then finally the guy makes contact and drives the sword in, and then he gets really close, and he's says something with hot breath. He's like, I gotcha. I don't know what they say, right? But he does. He says that really close, and then he pulls the sword out, and what happens? Because the sword's gone, the guy's fine, right? No! Because of the wound of the sword, when he pulls it out, the guy falls over and dies or has to convalesce for a long time. And even if he gets better, what is left when you get stabbed by a sword? A scar. Words are like that. So to be wise in our words, we need to know that our words can pierce like swords. They are really identity-shaping realities. We all know what it is to, again, get those statements that it feels like no amount of positive things can erase. You're worthless. You're dumb. You'll never amount to anything. But we also know that words can speak life. When you say to someone, you are kind, they hear that. You know what they hear? It's one of the most usable principles about using wise words is you need to remember this very simple fact. When you tell somebody you are, they hear I am. So if you say you are stupid, you know what they hear? I'm stupid. If you hear you are worthless, you know what they hear? I am worthless. But when you want to speak life, when you say you are good, you know what they hear? I am good. When they hear you are loved, they hear I am loved. So your words have astonishing force and power. They can speak life and death. That's the first principle of using wise words. We need to remember that our words are powerful. Second, we need to know the quality of what wise words are like. Now, there are a zillion different features of wise words, but I just want to give you 3 for this morning. It's that wise words are gentle, true, and few. Right? This exercises the principle. I'm going to start a phrase. You see if you can finish it. Let's imagine you're having a conversation, and maybe you said something that was a little, maybe it was true, but that person was kind of put off by it. What would they say to you? It's not what you said, it's how you said it. The quality of our words matter. And wise words, according to the book of Proverbs, are gentle, true, and few. Let's take gentle first. Proverbs 15:1 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. When you speak gently, you can lower the temperature of a conversation. You can diffuse anger. You can bring peace. But we also know, and we've had the experience, that that thing you know you shouldn't say, but you say can stoke up the fire of anger. Proverbs 12:25 says, anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up. This word kind, it actually means it's expansive. It means that it's a word that's not just nice. It's a word that's personal and pleasant and timely. It means that you know that person in a little bit of what they're going through or what they're up against. Gentle words are wise words. Now, I know that you may be listening to me and I'm leading out with your words have to be gentle. And I know what at least some of you are thinking. You have images of like, wait a second. Is the Bible telling me I got to be like Mr. Rogers right now? Like, do I have to go buy a cardigan and go like live with some puppets, I don't know, in a magical wonderland? And do I need to be that guy? Like, I don't really like puppets. I'm not interested in being, Mr. Rogers. And in fact, what I'd rather have is instead of a won't you be my neighbor sign, I want to stay off my lawn sign or beware the dog sign. Now, I can appreciate that sentiment, but let me tell you, this idea that gentle words or wise words falls into one of these paradoxical truths of the Bible. You don't have to work really hard to think about Jesus saying the first shall be last, right? Well, that's an oxymoron. That feels like, how does that happen? Jesus will say crazy things like, you have to lose your life to what? Find your life. Gentle words are the most powerful words you can speak. Listen to this. Proverbs 25:15. Through patience, a ruler can be persuaded, and a gentle tongue can break a bone. The proverb says that the most powerful, forceful words, the wisest words you can speak, will be gentle. And that gentle word isn't just some pushover kind of speech. It's the kind of speech that can break a bone. Have you ever noticed that when you use harsh speech or you raise your voice or you yell, it has diminishing returns over time? And then you got to yell just a little bit louder the next time. And you got to be just a little bit harsher. And it feeds on itself. I don't know if you've ever spoken harshly to a child. I have. I'm not proud of it. But they get used to it over time. And it requires more explosive displays of anger to get their attention, doesn't it? That's not the way gentle words work, does it? You don't have to get gentler and gentler. A gentle word can break a bone. It can land with force, and you don't need to womp up all this, ranting and raving and foaming at the mouth. Wise words are gentle. And remember, in your gentleness, you will have force. Second, wise words are true. Proverbs 24:26 says, an honest answer is like a kiss on the lips. I often say, I think about the people who I admire most in this life, and they're honest. I say often in conversations, honesty is one of the most, one of the best gifts we can give one another. I was just in a meeting this past week where somebody in the group had the courage to share something true about one of the challenges that they were up against in their own family life. And that was an act of courage, and it had this remarkable impact on our group. We were more together. We were closer. We were inspired. That true, honest word connected us. That's why he says it's like a kiss on the lips. It brings people together. When you give each other honesty, you are building a connected peer-to-peer relationship. Wise words are true. So we've seen that they're gentle. We've seen that they're true. And finally, wise words, the kind of quality that they take on is that they are few. And believe you me, this one terrifies me because I give 35-minute sermons pretty much weekly, and sometimes I go a little bit over. So my words aren't always few. But I think wise words are few. This is what Proverbs 17 says. It says, the one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered. Now, once I get over my flinching, I can see the truth of what it is that wise words are few. We all know what it's like. That person who can sit back and take in what's going on, and with just a few concise, clear, and compelling words, show us what exactly is going on. Now, how do they do that? Why are few words wise? You know why? Because when your words are few, do you know what you will spend some time doing while you're not talking? It's called listening. The wisest people listen well. They listen about what's going on. They take in the scene. They don't just wait like we do in the West to talk over somebody else to show them we're really interested in what they're saying, right? They wait and listen and seek understanding. Proverbs 10:19 says it this way. It says, sin is not ended by multiplying words, but the prudent hold their tongue. So, our words first have this incredible power, the power of life and death. Then, if we want to speak wisely, what are we going to do? We're going to speak in a particular way. We're going to speak with gentleness, in truth, and we're going to speak with few words. But lastly, I want to give you a couple categories, some kinds of wise words you and I can use. And again, there are a legion of categories of wise words we can use, but I just want to give you three. And they are questions, corrections, and exhortations. Man, doesn't it just make me sound brilliant when they all end in the same T-I-O-N, right? Yeah. And I'm going to preach about humility again soon because I need to work on that. Okay, first kind of wise words I can preach, that you can use are questions. Listen to these two verses together. It says, the heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out. And then what? The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight, what? Draws them out. In both instances, there is something to learn. Maybe something about the world, like acquiring knowledge. Maybe something about the person whose purposes are deep within their heart. And both of which require that we ask really good questions. See, questions stand in stark contrast to two techniques people use, right? Instead of asking questions, what do we usually do? We tell people what we think. And then, you know what we sometimes do? We tell people what they think. When we tell people what we think, that literally, like I just mentioned, it involves talking over them. We're kind of like on the starting line, like just, can you be done? And then I want to tell you what I have to say, right? And I have heard this when I've met people from different parts of the world. They say, man, you in the West, that's the way that you show you are interested in something, is you just talk over other people. And to ask a question requires that the other person answers it. Because see, without questions, the second alternative is we just tell people what they think. We don't spend any time seeking understanding. We don't get the wisdom of acquiring knowledge. We don't draw out what's in them. We just say like, I bet you're thinking this. I think, well, like if you asked me, maybe I would tell you. See, I think have you ever heard of this technique? There's a psychologist called, perspective taking, right? You're supposed to like understand how to take somebody else's perspective. Oftentimes, we do those two things. We tell people what we think and what they think when we are trying to take perspective. What if we switched it? And what if we did perspective receiving? That your job as a wise person was to ask enough really good questions to get at the root of what somebody thinks. Over the past year, I've read no less than 5 books on communication and conversation, which is probably not surprising, just because of the way I'm wired. And every single one, questions is one of the pillars of really good communication. I'm going to give you some of my favorite techniques and some of my favorite questions to ask. So in his book, Super Communicators, Charles Duhigg says, the first principle of asking good questions is you need to know what kind of conversation you're in. And the best way, there's three kinds of conversations that we often find ourselves in. It's one where the person wants helped, it's one where the person wants hugged, and it's one where the person wants heard. You need to know what kind of conversation you're in. If they want help, it's practical. Give me advice. Tell me what to do. If it's hugged, they just want this emotional connection. They want to hear that you know what they are going through. And lastly, if they want to be heard, they want to know that you're there with them and for them as a friend. So to ask good questions, you just kind of got to get, what kind of conversation are we in? Second, we need to ask questions that extend rather than stop a conversation. When you ask people about what they believe and what they value, when you ask people to make a judgment, and we ask people to recount an experience about their life, it draws out those deep truths. Let me give you an example. What's the famous question? What do we ask people when we meet them at a party? What do you do? Right? Everybody says that. Let's just say you're a teacher. Great. What's the next obvious question? What do? We start peppering them. What do you teach? I teach chemistry. Great. Where do you teach it? North Allegheny. Right? How long have you taught there? 10 years. Right? The staccato, just asking lots of questions. What if we asked about their experience rather than just all these facts we could find on LinkedIn if we had 3 seconds and our cell phone in front of us, right? What if, you're a teacher? How did you decide to become a teacher? Now, what have I done? I've asked them to tell me a story. Tell me about their life. Tell me a narrative. They can go as deep as they want to. One day I had a teacher that was the best, and that's why I want to be a teacher. Or they're I don't know, I got summers off, right? They have the freedom to go wherever they want to go. When you ask a question like that, it draws out that deep purpose of their heart. David Brooks invites us to ask not just what someone believes about an issue. You want to know a really wise question? Let's say you're locked into somebody you're disagreeing about, right? It's politics or religion or whatever. Rather than just saying what do you believe about that? Once you hear what they believe, what if you ask this question? How did you come to believe that? What life experience, what article, what thing has led you to hold this belief? You don't have to agree with it, but it is wise to understand how they got there. These kinds of open-ended questions. Questions that start with words like, how did you? Or what's it like to? Or tell me about? Or in what ways? There's actually, one of the principles is to start with really easy questions and then go deeper. There's a famous list of 36 questions, and they're called the 36 questions that lead to love. And they are questions that they gave, two people together, and they made them ask each other these questions of increasing levels of deepness. And by the end of it, rather than just talking about the weather, they always got closer. And so there's three kind of chunks of deepness. The first chunk of questions would have questions like, would you like to be famous, and in what way? The second chunk of questions have questions like, what's your most treasured memory? You can tell it's a little more deep, right? And then the last one is, ready? When did you last cry in front of another person or by yourself, right? You can tell that's a little bit deeper. I have started small groups to be funny, trying to go as deep as possible with the very first question. Something like I don't know, I will come up with this one that I'm going to pretend is made up, but I've actually said, just to be funny, is, hey, it's great to be here. Let's start our small group. What's your worst sin, and how mad do you think it made God? Scale 1 to 10. And then just be quiet. Some people will be like, oh, what was that one time? I was like, no, I don't need to hear it. That was a joke, okay? Right? Sometimes starting deep, you got to ask them, what was your favorite vacation? And then their worst sin, all right? You have to go in that order. If you want to be wise, start light and then go deeper. And then finally, you want to ask questions that are humble. One of the most humble questions you can ask people, you're going back and forth, you're talking about something you're doing or something that you're working on, and you can ask this question: how would you give me advice? It shows that person that you care about them, that you esteem them, that you think they have something to offer. So to be wise, we're going to ask questions because Proverbs 18:13 says this: to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. So I love when the Bible's that clear. Okay, we're going to ask questions. Second, we're going to have some corrections, okay? For most of the time, when the Proverbs talks about words, the burden lies on the speaker. This one's wild because the burden shifts a little bit. And now when Proverbs talks about corrections, it is almost always the burden lying on the person receiving corrections. Time and time again, it'll say, like, you're smart if you receive corrections, and you're dumb if you don't. Let me show you. Here's one that's kind of obvious. This is where the advice is on the giver of correction. Okay, this is what we think. It says, better is an open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses, right? So you can kind of tell that Proverbs is saying you should give correction to people. So, that makes sense. But almost immediately, it shifts, and the preponderance of verses in Proverbs talk about how you and I, to be wise, need to receive correction. Proverbs 3 says that the wise don't despise correction. Proverbs 13 says that the wise heed correction and are honored. Proverbs 15 says that the one who heeds correction is prudent, and the one who hates correction will die. Proverbs 15 and 19 say that if you heed correction, you will be at home among the wise. And if you want the latest edition of blunt Bible blasts, here's this one. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid. That's in the Bible. How many people want to be stupid? Give me an amen, right? I hope I didn't hear any, right? You need to not just speak correction, but receive correction if you want to be wise. And finally, we're going to ask some questions. We're going to give some corrections. And lastly, we're going to do some exhortations, right? I could have said encouragement, didn't end in T-I-O-N, so I didn't say that. But an exhortation is basically like an encouragement. It's used to encourage, inspire, challenge, or build up the faith of somebody else, okay? Listen to this in Proverbs 16. The hearts of the wise make their mouths prudent, and the lips promote instruction. Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Now, this is a description of what an exhortation is. It's gracious words that are like a honeycomb. It's prudent speech. It's promoting instruction. You're calling something out of somebody. You're pointing out something good. You're asking that it would grow. When you tell someone phrases, I'll give you some exhortations. I appreciate you. I love you. Maybe you affirm them. When you want to exhort them, you say, you're strong, you're brave, you're hardworking, you're insightful, you're kind. Maybe an exhortation just casts vision for their future. You're going to do great things. Your hard work is really going to pay off. You are a really good friend. I hope you've experienced this kind, gracious exhortation, and it is like sweet honeycomb to the soul. It's healing. This is what you get to do with your words of exhortation. I get to do this every night. I'll tell you, the wisest words I speak every single day in my life are with my son, Micah. He's my 10-year-old. And he's still at the age you tuck him in, right? The other two kids are like at the foot of the bed with the dog until like we're asleep, and then they just like wander to bed at like 11 or whatever, right? But Micah actually like put to bed and tuck him in. And every night Micah asks me to exhort him, and he uses that word. No, he doesn't. Maybe after hearing this sermon he will. But how does he ask me to exhort him? He wants me to say a scripture over him and then pray for him every night. It's like his way to make sure, the pastor dad can't say no to that, right? And so I'll go in his room, and he goes in the top bunk, and he leans over, and we hug, and I'll either say number 6 or Romans 15 or Psalm 23 or Philippians 4 over him from memory. It's a good exercise for me. But what am I doing? I'm speaking an exhortation over him. I'm saying that God will turn his face towards you, that God will fill you with hope and joy and peace, that God will guide you and care for you like a shepherd would for his sheep, and that God will hear your prayers and fill your mind with good things. Then I pray over Micah. And it's not rocket science. I just say, Micah, I'm so glad for you. God gave you to your mom and I. And he made you curious and strong and brave. And I speak vision. Sometimes I'll talk about him as a student or a disciple or a son or a brother or maybe a husband one day, maybe even a dad someday. And I exhort him by telling him how much I love him and that my love pales in comparison to the love of God for him. Church, this is not sophisticated. I hope you're not being like, wow, Adam invented saying scripture to kids, right? I didn't do that, okay? But you know where I deserve some credit? Is I do this. I do this every day. I do this every night. I'm in my house with my son, Micah. Ideas are cheap. implementation is what will cost you. To actually do this and get this done in your life. And by the way, you might be thinking like, oh, I haven't done that for years, or where would I start? Just start. The Bible's long. There's lots of good verses in it. Text me. I'll send you one, right? Get over whatever resistance you're feeling. Get over whatever but I'll feel weird or funny. Who cares? Get a backbone, right? Just get out there and try this. Maybe it's to your spouse. Maybe it's to your child. Maybe it's to your friend. Okay? So what have we talked about today? We're going to take communion here in a second, but I just want to recap. We have talked about the power of our words. They have life and death in them. We've talked about that if you want to speak wisely, there's a certain kind of quality your words have to have: gentle, true, and few. And then lastly, you have all sorts of options, but the three options we talked about is if you want to speak kind of wise phrases, maybe make them a question, a correction, or an exhortation. And what I want to say leading into communion is that Jesus knew all of this. He knew about the wisdom of words. He and his Father in heaven had a one-on-one dialogue going on for all eternity. When Jesus was baptized, the voice of God spoke from heaven, "This is my beloved Son with whom I am well pleased." He said that again at the Transfiguration. Jesus spoke to his Father all the time in prayer. Jesus knew his Father's words because of his study and mastery of Scripture. And Jesus knew the sting of the silence of God too. Because after an eternity of conversation with the God who loved him like crazy, Jesus hung on the cross and fired out some words to God. My God, why have you forsaken me?" And he got back silence. And he took that silence so that you would never have to experience silence from God. That you get to hear when you place your faith and trust in Jesus, you are loved. You are forgiven. You are accepted. You are redeemed. You are adopted. You are mine. Jesus took the silence so we could get the words.